The gleaming glass facade of Pinnacle Retail's flagship store on Fifth Avenue reflected the morning sunlight across the bustling New York sidewalk. Inside, the three-story luxury department store hummed with activity as staff prepared for another day of high-end retail. James Wilson, 62, walked slowly through the employee entrance at the back of the building. He wore simple khaki pants and a blue button-down shirt with maintenance embroidered above the pocket. His silver hair was neatly combed, and despite the lines of experience etched on his face, his eyes remained remarkably alert and observant. "Morning, James," called Diane from HR as she passed him in the hallway. "Ready for another day?" "Always am," James replied with a warm smile. After 15 years working maintenance at this location, he knew every corner of the massive store and anticipated problems before they became issues. On the main floor, preparations were underway for a special visit. Ryan Carter, the 38-year-old rising star who had recently been appointed Regional Director of Operations for the Eastern Seaboard, was making his first official tour of the flagship store. Known for his aggressive cost-cutting and efficiency measures, Carter had become something of a celebrity in retail management circles after being featured in Forbes' 40 Under 40 list. James moved methodically through the store, checking lighting fixtures and adjusting display stands that weren't perfectly aligned. Most shoppers never noticed him, a common occurrence for maintenance staff in luxury retail. At precisely 9:30 a.m., Ryan Carter made his grand entrance through the main doors. Tall, athletic, and impeccably dressed in a tailored navy Armani suit, Carter epitomized ambition personified. With an MBA from Wharton and a meteoric rise through the corporate ranks at several major retailers, he had been specifically headhunted by Pinnacle's board to modernize operations and maximize shareholder value. "Good morning, everyone," he announced with practiced authority, flanked by two young assistants struggling with tablets and portfolios. Carter stopped abruptly when he noticed a small smudge on one of the jewelry display cases. "Hey, you, maintenance," he called, snapping his fingers in James's direction. "There's a smudge on this display. Clean it immediately." James paused his current task and approached with his cleaning cloth. "Yes, sir. Right away." While cleaning, James noticed the documents Carter was reviewing: store performance metrics, staffing levels, and what appeared to be a reorganization plan marked confidential. "Thank you," Carter said distractedly when James finished. Then, noticing that the older man had glanced at his papers, he added sharply, "Do you find my documents interesting?" "I apologize, sir," James replied, lowering his gaze. "I didn't mean to intrude." "I highly doubt you'd understand complex retail analytics anyway," Carter responded with a dismissive smile, raising his voice so his entourage could hear. "Best to stick to what you know." Several managers chuckled nervously. A young woman from marketing looked uncomfortable. "Of course, sir," James answered with dignity. "Have a good day." "You know what the difference is between you and me?" Carter continued, unable to resist. "I solve complex business challenges using strategies developed through years of elite education. You solve simple problems with a rag." The laughter grew louder. James flushed slightly, but maintained his composure as he walked away with his cleaning cart. "Excuse me, Mr. Carter," interrupted Jessica Park, a young assistant manager. "The quarterly inventory reports you asked for?" "In my briefcase in the car," replied Carter irritably. "Go get them." In a quiet corner of the store, James paused by a large window overlooking Fifth Avenue. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the discomfort he felt. It wasn't the first humiliation, nor would it be the last. In the reflection of the glass, another James seemed to look back at him. A different man, with confidence and authority in his eyes. "Everything all right, James?" asked store manager David Chen passing by. "Just fine, Mr. Chen," James responded with a professional smile, taking a quick breather. "You've been here forever, haven't you? How many years now?" "Almost 15, sir." The manager nodded respectfully. "Consistency is a rare quality these days. Carry on." James resumed his work while Carter's commanding voice echoed from across the floor as he critiqued a display arrangement. What no one knew was that every evening, In his modest apartment in Queens, James Wilson meticulously reviewed retail industry reports and financial statements, keeping alive a passion he had never abandoned. The Q32 bus lumbered through the streets of Queens, gradually moving away from Manhattan. James gazed absently out the window, watching as the landscape transformed from gleaming skyscrapers to the more modest but character-filled neighborhoods of Jackson Heights. He disembarked at his regular stop and walked the 3 blocks to his apartment building, a well-maintained but unremarkable 6-story structure from the 1960s. On the 4th floor, he unlocked his door and was greeted by the aroma of fresh coffee. "Dad, is that you?" called a woman's voice from the kitchen. "Yes, Sarah. I'm home," replied James, hanging his jacket and placing his worn leather satchel on the small table by the door. Sarah Wilson, 31, emerged from the kitchen with a steaming mug. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, her expression brightening at the sight of her father. With a PhD in business administration, she worked as an associate professor at Queens College while consulting for small businesses on the side. "I made your favorite, Kenyan dark roast," she said, handing him the mug. "How was work today?" James settled into his favorite armchair with a sigh. The new regional director made his first appearance. Sarah sat on the couch across from him. "The famous Ryan Carter? How did that go?" "The usual," James replied, taking a sip of coffee. He made sure to highlight the vast intellectual gap between his executive thinking and my menial labor, in front of the entire management team naturally. "I don't understand why you continue to put up with this," said Sarah, frowning. "With your background, you could—" "We both know why," James gently interrupted. "That life is behind me now." Sarah sighed. She stood and retrieved a bottle of whiskey from a cabinet, pouring a small amount into her father's coffee. "Every time I walk into your study and see all those retail analytics reports, your constantly updated notes on market trends, Dad, you're living in 2 parallel worlds." James took a sip of his spiked coffee. "Keeps the mind sharp." "It's more than that," Sarah insisted. "It's a passion you've never let go of." She walked to the living room bookshelf and picked up an old framed photograph, bringing it back to show him. The image showed a younger James in an expensive suit, surrounded by smiling colleagues at the opening of what was clearly a high-end retail store. "You were so proud that day," Sarah said softly. James touched the frame nostalgically. 20 years ago. Seemed like the beginning of something extraordinary. "Tell me again what happened," Sarah asked. "I know it's painful, but I want to understand." James exhaled deeply. "I was executive vice president at Regent Luxury Group. Career on the rise, impressive results, industry recognition. Then, during a routine audit, I discovered documents implicating several senior executives and 2 board members in a sophisticated kickback scheme with suppliers and real estate developers. A well-organized system." Sarah listened attentively, though she knew the story by heart. "I had 2 choices," James continued. "Ignore what I'd found or report it all. And you chose to report it," Sarah completed. "Yes. I gathered evidence, presented it to the audit committee. I was convinced justice would prevail." James laughed bitterly. "Instead, those people had powerful connections. They counterattacked, accused me of fabricating evidence for personal vengeance after being passed over for promotion. They manufactured evidence against me. Suddenly, from whistleblower, I became the guilty party." "But you were exonerated," Sarah reminded him. "Yes, on appeal after 2 years of legal battles, but by then I'd lost everything. My job, my reputation, my savings spent on attorneys. No retail company would touch me. I was blacklisted in the industry." Sarah took her father's hand. "Yet you've never regretted it." "No," James confirmed firmly. "I followed my conscience. And eventually I found this maintenance job at Pinnacle. The irony, cleaning floors in the kind of store I once helped run, but it allowed me to support you, to pay for your education. And to silently keep track of the industry you loved," added Sarah. James smiled. being invisible has its advantages. I observe, listen, learn. No one pays attention to the maintenance man. After dinner, while Sarah worked on lecture notes for her next class, James retreated to his small study. The room was dominated by bookshelves filled with retail management texts, industry journals, and binders containing meticulous notes. On one wall, yellowed newspaper clippings documented the Regent scandal, as the media had dubbed it. James turned on his computer, a functional, if not cutting-edge model. He opened a document titled Analysis of Q1 2025 Luxury Retail Market Shifts, and resumed writing, adding observations and connections to other market trends. In one corner of his screen, a PDF showed the title of an article published in the prestigious Retail Leadership Quarterly, Evolving Consumer Behavior in Post-Pandemic Luxury Markets, authored by J.W. Analyst. No one suspected that this respected retail commentator, whose analyses were referenced even in boardrooms, was actually a maintenance worker who returned home each evening to intellectually don the executive suit that had been stripped from him. The grand event space on Pinnacle's top floor buzzed with activity. The company's quarterly leadership conference had drawn managers from stores across the eastern seaboard. The day's highlight would be Ryan Carter's presentation of his Vision 2030 transformation plan, a comprehensive strategy aimed at repositioning Pinnacle in the increasingly competitive luxury retail landscape. The room was arranged with military precision. Rows of chairs facing a stage adorned with the company's logo, presentation screens ready to display carefully crafted slides, and professional lighting that made the ordinary conference room look almost theatrical. Press representatives from retail industry publications hovered near the back, while photographers captured the company's elite gathering for the annual report. James moved discreetly around the room's perimeter, adjusting temperature controls and ensuring no technical issues would disrupt the important presentation. As usual, he was practically invisible to the assembled executives. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats," announced the communications director as Carter and the company's senior leadership entered from a side door. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Postures straightened, conversations quieted, attention focused forward. This was Ryan Carter's moment, and everyone knew it. Carter took his position at the podium with the confidence of someone accustomed to commanding attention. His presentation began with a slick video showcasing Pinnacle's heritage, followed by stark graphs illustrating market challenges. "As you can see," Carter explained, gesturing to a particularly dramatic downward trend, "our traditional approach to luxury retail is becoming unsustainable in today's market. We must evolve or face obsolescence." For the next 30 minutes, he outlined his vision: store closures in underperforming markets, staff reductions through natural attrition and productivity enhancements, and a pivot toward a digital-first omnichannel experience. To illustrate the urgency, Carter continued, "Consider our flagship store. Despite its prestigious location, it's operating at 22% below optimal efficiency. My analysis suggests we could maintain 95% of revenue with 70% of the current staff through strategic restructuring." James, who was adjusting a flickering light in the back of the room, couldn't help but react with a slight shake of his head. Carter noticed. "Is there a problem with the lighting, or do you disagree with my analysis?" he asked sharply, pointing James out to the entire room. "The lighting is fine now, sir," James replied quietly. "I apologize for the distraction." Carter could have let it go, but something about the maintenance man's composure irritated him. "No, please, if you have insights into retail efficiency metrics that I've overlooked, I'm sure everyone would love to hear them." Uncomfortable laughter rippled through the audience. "It's nothing, sir," James said, trying to fade back into invisibility. "No, really," Carter insisted, his voice taking on a mocking tone. "Perhaps you've spotted something in my revenue projection models that my Wharton professors missed? Or maybe you've developed an alternative theory of retail space utilization while changing light bulbs." The laughter grew louder, more confident now that the target was clearly established. James stood perfectly still, his face neutral despite the public humiliation. "Let's continue," Carter finally said with a theatrical sigh, "unless our maintenance staff has further strategic input." During the lunch break that followed, executives clustered in small groups, discussing Carter's proposals over catered sandwiches and sparkling water. James quietly emptied trash bins and wiped down surfaces as the room gradually emptied for the afternoon breakout sessions. He was almost finished when Carter returned with several senior executives to retrieve his laptop. "The transformation plan is essentially foolproof," Carter was saying loudly. "The board will approve it next week, and implementation begins immediately after. We'll start with a 15% reduction in non-essential personnel." James tried to slip out unnoticed, but Carter spotted him. "Ah, the maintenance man with opinions," he called out. The executives with him turned to look. "Did you enjoy the presentation? Any thoughts on our quarterly earnings projections?" James remained silent, continuing his work. "Come now, don't be shy," Carter persisted. "Earlier you seemed to have something to say." "It's just that..." James hesitated, aware he was crossing a line. "Your efficiency metrics don't account for the relationship between staff reductions and the degradation of the customer experience, particularly in the luxury segment where personal service is a key differentiator." A stunned silence fell over the group. Carter's face flushed visibly. "Excuse me?" he finally managed. "You're here to clean, not critique corporate strategy? Who exactly do you think you are?" "No one important, sir," replied James, returning to his cart. "I apologize for speaking out of turn." Carter, determined not to lose face, raised his voice. "This is why you push a broom while I direct regional operations. Next time you want to play business analyst, remember your place." The executives laughed nervously, though a few looked uncomfortable. A young woman from the strategy team observed the scene with a thoughtful expression, making a note in her phone. "Ryan, perhaps we should..." attempted one of the older executives, clearly uncomfortable. "What? Take strategic advice from the janitor?" Carter retorted dismissively. "Maybe next I'll consult the parking attendant on our e-commerce platform, or ask the cafeteria staff about our international expansion plans." James walked away silently, feeling the stares of pity and amusement following him. Only one junior executive, Melissa Chen, seemed troubled by the incident, watching James with curious eyes. That evening, in his luxurious corner office overlooking Manhattan, Carter frantically researched retail staffing efficiency metrics on his laptop. With growing horror, he discovered that several recent studies from Wharton and Harvard Business Review had indeed established a direct correlation between staff reductions and decreased customer satisfaction in the luxury retail sector, exactly as the maintenance man had suggested. "Damn it!" he exclaimed, throwing a pen across his desk. He grabbed his phone and dialed quickly. "Melissa, come to my office immediately. We need to revise all the staffing projections in the transformation plan and bring the customer experience impact studies from the last quarter." As he ended the call, his mind returned to the maintenance man. How did that employee know about advanced retail metrics? And more importantly, how did he know precisely which flaw to identify in Carter's carefully crafted presentation? Rain streaked down the windows of Pinnacle's executive floor, creating a somber atmosphere that matched Ryan Carter's mood. After spending 3 sleepless nights revising his transformation plan, the regional director looked visibly strained. His presentation to the board was scheduled for tomorrow, and everything was at stake. "Mr. Carter, these revised projections still show a 12% staff reduction," noted Melissa Chen during their morning prep session. "But you've added this new section on enhanced customer experience preservation. That wasn't in the original plan. I felt it necessary to address certain concerns that came to my attention," Carter replied vaguely, avoiding admission that his entire strategy had been flawed. In the boardroom, James was carefully checking the presentation system. The board meeting would be held here tomorrow, and he wanted to ensure everything worked perfectly. The room was empty. Executives were in strategy sessions on another floor. As he tested the projector, James noticed a leather portfolio forgotten under a chair. Opening it to identify the owner, he was shocked to discover it contained confidential documents, detailed profiles of struggling Pinnacle stores that Carter planned to close, including personal information about employees to be terminated. What caught James's attention, however, was something else. financial projections showing that several of the stores marked for closure were actually performing well when measured by customer loyalty metrics rather than pure efficiency standards. The data had been selectively presented to support Carter's aggressive downsizing narrative. "This isn't right," James murmured to himself, quickly photographing several pages with his phone. "What are you doing?" Carter's sharp voice made James straighten quickly. The executive had returned to the boardroom and was watching him with suspicious eyes. "I apologize, sir," James explained, pointing to the portfolio. "I was just gathering these left-behind documents." "I didn't leave them behind. I placed them there temporarily," Carter exclaimed, snatching the portfolio. "Were you going through my confidential materials?" "No, I'll have you fired immediately," threatened Carter. "This is a breach of confidentiality." James remained calm. "Mr. Carter, these documents, you realize they contain manipulated data, don't you?" Carter paled. "What did you say?" "The performance metrics for the Cleveland and Denver stores have been selectively presented," continued James. "When customer retention and lifetime value are factored in, they're actually among your strongest locations outside major metropolitan areas." "How dare you?" Carter was furious. "You're just maintenance staff. You have no idea how corporate retail works." "Actually, Mr. Carter," replied James with dignity, "I believe I have a very clear understanding of how retail works, and of professional ethics." "What do you want?" asked Carter, suddenly suspicious. "Money?" James shook his head, disgusted. "I want nothing from you, but you need to decide what kind of leader you want to be." "Who are you really?" Carter demanded, studying James's face as if seeing him for the first time. "I'm exactly who I appear to be," James answered simply. "A man who made difficult choices to stand by his principles." He walked away, leaving Carter alone with his documents and his conscience. That evening in his apartment, James was reviewing retail industry reports with Sarah when an unexpected knock came at the door. "Are you expecting someone?" Sarah asked, surprised. James shook his head and went to answer. Standing in the hallway with an uncertain expression was Melissa Chen, the junior executive from Carter's team. "Mr. Wilson, I'm sorry to intrude," she said nervously. "Could I speak with you?" James invited her in, curious. Sarah excused herself to her room. "How did you find my address?" James asked. "I checked the employee database," admitted Melissa. "I know I shouldn't have, but..." She trailed off, noticing the bookshelves filled with retail management texts and industry reports. Her eyes widened. "So it's true." "What's true, Ms. Chen?" "After what happened today, I was curious. I did some research on you." She pulled up an article on her tablet. "I found this in the Wall Street Journal archives." James looked at the screen. It was an article from 18 years ago about the Regent Luxury Group scandal. His name was prominently mentioned as the executive who had exposed the corruption. "That's not all," continued Melissa. "I've read articles by J.W. Analyst in Retail Leadership Quarterly. The writing style, the specific insights. It's you, isn't it?" James remained silent, neither confirming nor denying. "Why are you working maintenance if you're such a brilliant retail strategist?" Melissa asked with genuine curiosity. "Life sometimes takes us on unexpected journeys," James replied with a sad smile. "There's something else," added Melissa hesitantly. "Carter is planning something terrible. He's manipulated data to justify closing stores that are actually performing well based on deeper metrics. I don't know what to do." James looked at her intently. "Why come to me?" "Because you had the courage to do the right thing 18 years ago, even at the cost of your career," Melissa answered. "And because I need to know if I can still believe in integrity in this business." The next day, to everyone's surprise, the board meeting took an unexpected turn when the chairman announced they had received an anonymous package containing a comprehensive analysis of Pinnacle's store performance using a more holistic set of metrics. These metrics revealed that many of the stores slated for closure in Carter's plan were actually valuable long-term assets to the company. Carter, stunned, looked across the boardroom to where James was quietly adjusting a thermostat. Their eyes met briefly in a silent exchange that no one else could interpret. A crowd of employees gathered in Pinnacle's main auditorium for the company-wide announcement. Rumors had been swirling for days following the mysterious postponement of Carter's transformation plan. Executives, store managers, and staff from headquarters filled the seats, while maintenance and security personnel stood along the walls. James arrived early for his shift and was surprised when the head of human resources approached him. "Mr. Wilson, your presence is requested in the CEO's office," she said formally. "Immediately." Confused, James made his way to the executive floor. Entering the CEO's office, he was astonished to find not only Catherine Harmon, Pinnacle's chief executive officer, but also the chairman of the board, and remarkably, Edward Reynolds, the founder of Pinnacle Retail, who had retired from daily operations 5 years earlier, but remained the company's largest shareholder. "Mr. Wilson," greeted Harmon, or should I say Mr. James Wilson, former executive vice president of Regent Luxury Group. James stood motionless, unable to respond. "Please sit down," continued Harmon, gesturing to a chair. "We've received some very interesting information in the past 48 hours. A young executive, Melissa Chen, brought forward concerns about data manipulation in the transformation proposal. During the investigation, your name emerged in a surprising context." The chairman spoke next. "We've reviewed the Regent scandal from 18 years ago, Mr. Wilson. New evidence has surfaced that conclusively proves you were the victim of a coordinated effort to discredit a whistleblower. Furthermore," added Reynolds, the founder, "we've discovered your identity as JW Analyst, author of some of the most insightful retail industry analyses of the past decade, analyses that have influenced even our own strategic decisions." James looked at the three executives, bewildered. "I don't understand." "The board has unanimously voted to offer you a position as senior strategic advisor, reporting directly to me," said Harmon formally. "The injustice you suffered will finally be addressed." 2 hours later, the company auditorium was filled beyond capacity for the announcement. Ryan Carter sat in the front row, noticeably uncomfortable, aware that his career trajectory had taken a sudden, unexpected turn. A murmur swept through the room when CEO Harmon and the chairman entered and walked directly to James, who was discreetly adjusting the microphone stand on stage. "Mr. Wilson," said Harmon, shaking his hand in front of the entire company, "it's an honor to finally acknowledge your contributions to retail excellence, though the circumstances have been unusual." A wave of confused whispers spread through the audience. Carter, mouth partially open, watched the scene in disbelief. The chairman took the microphone. "I'd like to announce that, following a review of circumstances surrounding James Wilson's departure from Regent Luxury Group 18 years ago, we have recognized not only his innocence but his fundamental role in exposing one of the largest corruption scandals in retail history." Camera flashes illuminated James's emotion-filled face as he accepted handshakes from the executives. "Furthermore," continued the chairman, "many of you have read and respected the analyses of JW Analyst in industry publications. Today we can reveal that those insights came from James Wilson, who has been quietly contributing to retail thought leadership while working in our maintenance department." The auditorium erupted in spontaneous applause, with many employees standing in respect. Journalists frantically took notes and photographs. "Effective immediately," announced CEO Harmon, "James Wilson is appointed Senior Strategic Advisor to Pinnacle Retail, where his decades of expertise and unwavering integrity will help guide our company's future." James stepped to the microphone, visibly moved. "Thank you for this unexpected opportunity. For 15 years, I've watched this company from a unique perspective, seeing both its operations and its people from ground level. I've witnessed the dedication of store associates who create the experiences our customers value. I've observed the challenges and opportunities that often remain invisible at the executive level." He paused, his gaze briefly meeting Carter's in the front row. "In retail, as in life, true value isn't always captured in traditional metrics. Sometimes the most important assets are the human connections, institutional knowledge, and community presence that don't show up neatly on spreadsheets." As applause filled the room again, Sarah Wilson, seated in the back, wiped tears from her eyes. Beside her sat Melissa Chen, smiling with the satisfaction of having taken a stand for integrity. Later that afternoon, James found himself in what would be his new office, a spacious room with windows overlooking Fifth Avenue. As he stood taking in the view, there was a knock at the open door. Ryan Carter stood in the doorway, his usual confidence notably diminished. "Mr. Wilson," he began awkwardly, I owe you an apology." James gestured for him to enter. "Please, come in." "I treated you horribly," Carter admitted. "I made assumptions based on your position rather than seeing you as a person." "It's a common mistake," replied James without bitterness. "We often confuse a person's job with their capabilities or worth." Carter nodded uncomfortably. "I've been reassigned to our Midwest division. A step down, but deserved." "What will you do differently there?" asked James. Carter considered the question carefully. "Listen more, especially to the people doing the actual work. They see things executives miss." "That's a good start," James said with a small smile. "I still don't understand," Carter said, shaking his head. "Why maintenance? With your knowledge and experience, you could have found something better." "After the scandal, no retail executive would hire me," James explained. "But I needed income to support my daughter through college. The maintenance position let me stay connected to the industry I loved, just from a different perspective." "And you kept writing those analyses all these years." "Knowledge doesn't disappear just because your title does," James replied. "And sometimes, seeing an industry from the ground up gives you insights you'd never gain from the executive suite." Carter extended his hand. "I hope I can learn from my mistakes." James shook it firmly. "That's all any of us can do." As Carter left, Sarah appeared in the doorway carrying a small box. "I brought something from home," she said, placing it on the desk. Inside was the old photograph of James at the store opening, now in a new frame. "For your new office," she explained. "To remember that sometimes life comes full circle." James placed the photo on his desk, where sunlight streamed in through the windows. The journey from executive to maintenance worker and back to advisor had been long and unexpected, but standing in this new office, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a sense that justice, however delayed, had finally been served. "Ready for your first executive meeting in 2 decades?" Sarah asked with a smile. James straightened his new tie, a gift Sarah had brought along with the photo. "I've been preparing for this every day for the past 18 years, he replied, following her into Pinnacle's boardroom, where his unique perspective would finally be heard.